What's happening, everybody? Welcome once again. This is Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse athletics. Syracuse drops its ACC home opener, their second ACC loss of the year, having lost previously to Notre Dame and South Bend. The Orange open up ACC home play at the Dome with an 81-71 loss to Wake Forest. So plenty to go over here. We'll hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders as we go through the program. And we are certainly looking at some New Year's resolutions that Syracuse basketball is going to need to carry over into 2025, but what they will carry over into next year, see you next year, let's get that joke out of the way right now, is a below 500 record and an approach that you are going to have to take as a Syracuse basketball fan that is not going to be easy to do. 2025 is going to bring in a New Year's resolution that a Syracuse basketball fan is going to have to make to themselves. And it's one they usually don't have to make. You know, everybody's making resolutions this time of year. Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to quit smoking? Do you want to quit drinking? Whatever the case may be, right? This is the time of the year everybody says, I've got to make some hard choices and I've got to do some difficult things. That is going to be the task a Syracuse basketball fan is going to have to take on in the new year, which is tough to do because you turn to Syracuse basketball to get you through the winter. You turn to Syracuse basketball as entertainment to get away from life's problems, to forget about those resolutions that you're struggling with, right? So it's tough when your sports team of choice, what you turn to get away from whatever struggles and frustrations you're going through in real life, you have to take the same approach with. But that's just what this team is. It is a flawed team. It is not a good team. It's a team that's still trying to find itself. It is a team that desperately needs a lineup change that we're going to talk about here shortly. And guys, I mean, frankly, it is going to be work to follow this team in 2025, and you're going to have to really dig in. I'm not saying you have to accept what you're saying. I'm just saying it's going to be different than it has been because reality is setting in. There's a really good comment from my guy, Frankie S., Syracuse Sports Insider, that we'll highlight a little later. Saw Frankie and his beautiful fiance at the Dome tonight. Saw plenty of Syracuse Sports Insiders tonight. Shout out to Denise. Shout out to Brian. Shout out to Frankie. Shout out to Mike and a few other insiders that stopped by. Anytime you guys are at the Dome, come by, say hello. Would love to see you. You don't have to be an insider to do that. Anybody certainly can stop by, but always great to see our Syracuse Sports Insiders. So, look, Oh, that's not the one I wanted to highlight. Brian, we'll get to your comment later. Here's what we wanted to put up there. That's how you become a Syracuse Sports Insider. Just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. You can also hit that link, joinsubtext.com/Syracuse Sports. Make a New Year's resolution to be a more informed Syracuse sports fan, to get direct text message access to me. Love seeing the flow of comments during games, and anytime you want to text, we keep you updated on everything that's going on football-wise. You got Jean-Ray Reed, Syracuse center, the big general, went into the transfer portal here on New Year's Eve. What's going on with LaQuinn Allen? He had a meeting with Fran Brown today, so we'll keep you updated on the football stuff, certainly through basketball, lacrosse around the corner, and being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you get it first. You get direct text message access to me, and love the insider questions and comments and what you want us to ask coaches and players, your opinions and your thoughts on all things Syracuse sports. So let's go over a few things, not only from this game, but what we're kind of looking at big picture-wise for Syracuse basketball. Chris Bell cannot be in the starting lineup anymore. And I don't think it matters in a sense because Chris Bell plays 9 minutes tonight. He does not score. He has not hit a three-pointer since the Tennessee game. That's 6 games and counting, where your best three-point shooter by at least statistics average in history has not hit a three-pointer in 6 straight games. And it's interesting, I'm going to play Adrian Autry's opening comment here shortly, but I asked Autry after the game, and what do you do about a guy like Chris Bell who is in a sustained slump? What do you have left in your coaching bag of tricks to get him out of it? And one thing that Red said is sometimes a player, and I went through this as a player, he said, you have to do something different to get your mind off of what you're not doing well, and then all that will circle back, right? The problem with Chris Bell is he's not out there to do anything else. Chris Bell is out there to hit three-pointers, point blank. He is a three-point sniper by description. He's what you need out there. Syracuse and Wake Forest come into this game tonight, the 2 worst three-point shooting teams in the ACC. and two of the worst in the country. They both rank in the 300s. Wake hit 9 threes in this game, and we'll get to that in a defensive approach that Syracuse has to think about. So it almost doesn't matter that Chris Bell starts because he immediately gets pulled. Lucas Taylor and Kyle Cuffe come in, and Syracuse got a huge lift off of its bench, right? So what does taking Bell out of the lineup do? It changes his mentality. It changes the pressure that's on him, and sometimes you just need that kick in the butt. You need that lift. Chris Bell is a three-point shooter. He can come in and spell this team and give this team a boost, perhaps off the bench when they need three-point shooting. But he is hurting you more than he's helping you as a player right now. I mean, his line tonight, 9 minutes, 2 turnovers, 1 foul, 0 of 1 shooting. He does not score, right? And that's supposed to be a veteran player that's supposed to be carrying you at this point. So just looking at it objectively, looking at it from a production standpoint, there's not a player that's going to snap out of it. And you say all the right things. And I talked to a bunch of players in the locker room, helping Chris Bell through this. Chris Bell was not available in the locker room afterwards, didn't want to talk, and I certainly don't blame him at this point. So if you're looking at it from a basketball standpoint, both Mike Waters and I asked in postgame, are you thinking about a lineup change? You have to change the lineup now. You have to shake things up if you're Red Autry. He said it himself in the postgame about why he played Lucas and Kyle as much as he did. Was he trying to, air quotes, send a message to Chris Bell and Elijah Moore? And he said, no, I'm trying to win. And I actually believe him when he says that. I don't think he's trying to send anybody a message or anything. No, you got to put guys out there that are producing, because Elijah Moore is struggling as well, and he's starting to get into a sustained slump. But the big difference between Elijah Moore and Chris Bell, Elijah Moore's a freshman and is going to struggle and is going to have trouble getting over that hill, getting into conference play. And they need him too, because those are your 2 best 3-point shooters. But you can't start Bell anymore. You've got to restructure the lineup and figure out what that is going forward, which you don't want to be talking about 13 games into the season, but that's the reality of the situation. The biggest New Year's resolution that Syracuse has to have, though, is they have to start better. This is a team that has struggled out of the gate all year long. They have struggled out of the gate in big games against Maryland, their worst loss of the year, Tennessee, Texas, this game, even other games. This team just does not know how to start well. And that's something I asked a lot of players after the game, too. And you'll see some of those quotes in my overheard column that will be out on New Year's Day, on Wednesday, January the 1st. When you're starting slow, now tonight it was defense. Wake Forest just kept going inside. Syracuse was helpless to stop this team. They get out to, at one point, a 19-3 lead. Defense was the reason that Syracuse did not start well. But to start well, it's simple things. It's high percentage shots. Get the ball inside. Use the glass. Use Lampkin. Use Freeman. Take good shots. This team is not smart in a lot of ways in how they run their offense and in situational basketball, and really starting to question a lot of Autry's methods there. But the easiest way to get off to a better start on offense is keep it as simple as possible. Move the darn ball, get it inside, kiss it off the glass. But if you're going to play defense like that, it's not going to matter. But this team cannot keep digging itself the holes that it's doing. Now, it's incredible that they get down 19-3, audible boos in the Dome. You go into halftime, and it's 36-34. Syracuse briefly gets the lead in the second half, but then Wake Forest, again, I remind you, the worst three-point shooting team in the ACC and one of the worst in the country, hits 4 3-pointers in a row to tilt the lead their way, to tilt the momentum back their way, and Syracuse had a lot of little things add up. Yeah, I know I say free throws matter all the time. Autry talked about it afterwards. Syracuse 24 of 32 at the free throw line. Carlos, Cuffe, guys getting to the free throw line that have high percentages normally. Let's look at it here. Freeman went 3 of 3. Carlos went 6 of 9 from the free throw line. You can't have the point guard with the ball in his hands that much, and if he's going to drive to the paint as much as he was in this game, and Carlos at one point rattled off 8 straight points late in the game, that's great. You got to make your free throws. You can't keep leaving this many points on the board. Lampkin hit a couple. Cuffe was 9 for 11. Peter got up there, went 3 or 4. Davis missed 2 in his one spot at the free throw line. I'll give him that, because some guys, I'm not saying you got to be the one that make your free throws, but this adds up over time. Turnovers, again, an issue for Syracuse. It was an issue in the last game when they had 21. They had 18 in this game. Now, Wake only got 14 points off those 18 turnovers, but That's how you out-rebound a team by 10, which Syracuse did tonight, which, by the way, that has not been an issue all year long. Syracuse is actually a pretty good rebounding team. But when you out-rebound a team by 10, but you have that many turnovers, it washes the possessions. And when you have bad possessions and no flow on offense, and you're still trying to figure out who your go-to guy is, and all understanding that J.J. Starling is out of the lineup. Good news on that front, by the way, guys. J.J. Starling, no wrap on his hand, sitting courtside at this one. So he's making progress when he comes back. I can't pin a date on it. Mid-January seems to be the track of people coming back from a 4 to 6 week broken hand injury. He seems to be on track for that, but the fact that he's no longer wearing a brace or anything on his hand, he's getting activity in practice, he's shooting again, so he's getting there, but you don't want to risk putting him out there too early. This team certainly needs J.J. Starling, but you need more than J.J. You need a go-to guy, which this team doesn't know it has. You need to make your free throws. You need to cut back on turnovers, but this all circles back to what I said a moment ago. Know what time the game starts, and you've got to figure out a way, and I think simplifying things is the best way to do it, and also, playing a little defense helps, but you can't keep digging yourself this kind of hole, right? And the players know it, and they're just as baffled by it. I talked to Eddie Lampkin after the game, and he's like, we can't play for 35 minutes. We got to play for 40. Carlos took a lot of responsibility on that. Again, you'll see some of those quotes in my overheard column that comes out the day after the game about what he can do with somebody who has the ball in his hands a lot as the point guard to help that. But however they do it, it's got to be something that Syracuse does not carry over into 2025, or they're going to keep having these issues. They start slow. They're not good at free throws. They can't shoot threes. So this team has more things it can't do than it can do at this point. So find the thing you can do and exploit it as well as you possibly can. I've talked all year about Kyle Cuffe Jr. I've kind of joked around, if you are a regular watcher of the pod and the post-game shows, how I had an affinity for Yassine Willis on the football team, and Kyle Cuffe, a lot of you guys were saying, kind of became my Yassine Willis of the basketball team. Now, there's good news and bad news with this, and I brought it up in the last postgame show, okay? Kyle Cuffe, tonight, when you look at 14 points, you will take that. When you look at 6 rebounds, you will take that. When you look at 36 minutes for a guy who averages 8 minutes a game, you could clearly see some fatigue catching up to him late in the game. But it is how Kyle Cuffe plays the game. Sets the tone, how aggressive. There was a play, Kyle Cuffe drove in the paint and just got absolutely stuffed, right? A few possessions later, does the same thing, gets to the rack. Certainly got to the free throw line. As we mentioned, when you look at his free throw numbers, total, Cuffe was 9 of 11 from the free throw line, right? Now, what Kyle Cuffe has got to watch, and I think I was saying this to Insider Brian, who I saw at the Dome tonight, his mentality and the way he plays the game is now catching up to his talent. The more minutes you get and the more comfortable you get, you'll be better offensively. But I brought this up in the last post-game show, and I'm going to bring it up in this one. He has got to be careful about the shot selection, particularly in the second half when he went 0 for 7 and missed a bunch of threes. And you can't have Kyle Cuffe be the guy. And I understand you're looking for somebody, a spark, somebody to shoot threes when Bell's out, when Moore is out, and you just kind of go down the list. JJ's out, right? Kyle Cuffe cannot be taking 8 3-pointers. He went 1 of 6 in the last game for Syracuse in their non-conference closer against Bucknell. He went 1 of 8 tonight, all right? 2 of 14 from the field. I like that Kyle Cuffe can get to the rack. I like that Kyle Cuffe is aggressive. The way he plays sets a tone. He's going to earn more time. He deserves to be out there. His shot selection has got to get better, though, because you can't keep having those numbers, because now we're just 2 of 14 this game, 1 of 8 from three-point range. There's a happy medium here with Cuffe. Everybody that's watched this team the past few games would have to agree he should be on the floor more. How he compliments Carlos, how he'll compliment JJ when JJ comes back. He has earned this. He has pushed for it. And as I said, beggars can't be choosers with that lineup right now. The way that Kyle Cuffe plays the game is needed on the court. He's just got to be a little more careful with his shot selection. And like we said, tonight, he's trying to make things happen, and God bless the kid. You want somebody out there that's trying to make things happen as opposed to somebody who's been disappearing on the court, which unfortunately Chris Bell has been, and Elijah Moore also did. But 2 of 14, 1 of 8 from three-point range, you can't have it. You can't have that. So there is a happy medium. No question about it with Kyle Cuffe. But, man, the way he plays the game, the spark he's giving this team, which he now can do. I don't think he's necessarily going to work his way into the starting lineup. So we brought up that lineup change that's going to be needed. That's going to equal more points and more opportunities for Lucas Taylor if Chris Bell's taken out of the lineup. But you had Kyle Cuffe. What did he end up with minutes-wise here? He ended up 36 minutes for a guy that averages 8 minutes a game. So you're going to need more of Kyle Cuffe in how he plays the game, contributions. Just he's got to watch the shot selection in this one. 2 of 14. It clearly took more shots than anybody. The next closest was Taylor, who we brought up, 6 and 11, and he took 7 threes. But Taylor's making enough of his threes, and his shots are good enough. Red said this after the game. They took 22 threes, and he didn't think any of them were bad. I mean, I'm sure if I went through the film, I could find 3 or 4 that you shouldn't take. But I generally agreed with them. This was not a team that was out there gunning it tonight. Those shots were there. The problem is they just don't have the shooters, the aces out there, making the ones they need to, nor do they have enough shooters right now that could do it. Cuffe is trying to light a fire, trying to do something. I've seen Kyle Cuffe make threes, but he's not a good enough percentage shooter or high enough on that totem pole right now to be the main three-point shooter, even with the players that are out and are struggling, as we mentioned. Happy medium, they'll find it. He deserves, 36 minutes a game. That's a lot. But in this game tonight, as Red brought up, I'm trying to win. Those other guys aren't giving me anything right now. It's going to lead, I think, to more of what we saw tonight as this continues. But when JJ starts to work his way back in the lineup, I'll be as curious as anybody how that works. There's another guy that I think Syracuse needs a little more production from, and I think he played a lot better tonight and looked a lot better tonight than he has the prior 2 games, and that's Jair Davis. With the three-point shooting breaking down, and you just don't have that guy right now. Donnie Freeman, not his best game tonight, 7 points, 4 rebounds, 23 minutes. It was strange how much he was held out of the lineup. It kind of from midway point of the second half through the end of the game. I think that was a very strange lineup choice by Autry. But with Lampkin struggling, now Lampkin had 10 rebounds tonight. 8 and 10. He had 18 and 11 against Bucknell, but this was not a good Eddie Lampkin game. Lampkin is good for about 25 minutes. Lampkin, I hate to say it because anybody that's dealt with a bad back knows how that can flare up at any time, but he's out of shape. And that you can't have a guy at this point going into the new year who's clearly out of shape. He came in out of shape, he's still out of shape, and he can only give you 25 minutes or so. Now, Eddie Lampkin plays hard. Eddie Lampkin can give you that spark. Eddie Lampkin has connected with the fan base. He'll go at it when he's out there, but there's kind of, I meant to say this in the last post-game show, and we just didn't get around to it, but there's kind of a ticking clock on Eddie Lampkin, and that's not a guy you're counting on. Like, Kyle Cuffe comes out and plays 36 minutes. He's clearly winded at the end of the game because he's not used to playing those minutes. Lampkin knew he was going to be playing those minutes. He's the primary center. You don't have a backup center because Naheem McLeod just can't do it at this point, and he's clearly out of shape still at this point of the season. But he'll give you 18 and 11. He'll give you good games. He'll give you 10 rebounds. He'll be the loudest talker on the court. Lampkin has a role, right? It's just unfortunate that, you have a guy who, frankly, you brought in essentially as a free agent, right, in the NIL era in college sports, who clearly is out of shape at this point, and we'll see how that goes. And you're getting into league play now. You really got to grind, right? You're playing, not a lot of 2 games in 3 days, but that's going to happen in ACC play. The space between games shrinks. You're playing one on the dome, one at the dome, going on the road. Like fatigue and travel, those things hurt a player who's not in as best shape as they can be. So we have to keep an eye on that. And again, I want to be fair. He has a back issue that he's dealing with too, but he's only good for a certain amount of minutes at a position when Syracuse does not have a backup. So then this is where Jair Davis comes in. They could need a little more production from him. He will often come in for Eddie in the lineup when Red kind of mixes it up. Davis, 7 points tonight, 3 of 8, 7 rebounds. I like the second chances he can give you. I like the energy he can give you. I think he's a smart player. Look, Davis came from Delaware. This is a step up. to ACC play. Clearly, Lucas Taylor handled it in game 2 of ACC play. Jaquan Carlos handled it as well as he could, and he had too many turnovers for my taste tonight. And you don't want Carlos being your primary offensive weapon. And again, he's got to make his free throws if he's going to get there as much as he did. But he gave you 16 points, right? Not as many assists in this game as last game. He had 4 assists in this one, and Carlos has his flaws, as we've talked about here. But I'll take the way he played, the way he got to the basket, and at least in his position, you have other options when a Kyle Cuffe is playing well, and you can mix some things in, and there's relief on the way when JJ gets back in the mix. Lampkin, when he's not playing well, now you got to get creative. And now teams know Syracuse can't shoot the 3, so the more players Syracuse has in the paint that you have to account for, the better. Right now, Davis is not a player that teams are afraid of. And here's the other thing with Davis, I think he's got to really back off on. 3 3-point attempts. Davis is not a good enough 3-point shooter to be taking 3 a game, right? I know these guys love to shoot 3s, but they have got to talk him out of that and get him out of that. He's just not consistent. He's free to prove me wrong. If he gets those open shots and he's hitting them from the corner and shows that he could be a threat there, great. Prove me wrong on that. But what I see right now is a guy that should be around the basket 100% of the time and should not be stepping out and shooting as many 3s. But that's a guy they need, and I think can help them in the paint, right? Freeman didn't have as good a game. Again, and he was held back by a curious lineup decision, frankly, by Autry in this one. But even Freeman's taken a lot of outside shots. He can shoot it, right? But Freeman, not that he can't get to the hoop, he can. But when you think of Donnie Freeman's game right now, I'm looking at that fadeaway jumper he's taking at the free throw line. He does hang around the 3-point line. Took a few in this game, hit a couple in the last game, right? I'm not thinking of the guy that's charging the rack and throwing it down. I'm not thinking of a guy that's around the hoop as much as he should be. So Davis is the happy medium, right? Taylor was great tonight, but he's proving more to be of a shooter and somebody that's going to linger around the perimeter. Lampkin, great game here. We'll mix in. We mentioned the issues with how out of shape he is at this point. So Davis is like the missing piece. When I watch this team, I see something that's missing, and I think he's what's missing. I think if he can give you some consistent minutes, even off the bench, and be somebody the defenses have to account for and respect, that will open some things up for other guys, particularly with the lack of the perimeter offensive threat Syracuse has right now, that is only going to help your cause. And the jury's still out on Davis, right? We have these guys that are stepping up from lower levels. And again, Lucas Taylor from Georgia State checks the box tonight. Jaquan Carlos from Hofstra, I would say, checks the box tonight, right? Other games he hasn't, but in this one he did. Davis certainly got the build and the physicality to do it, but we got to see if he can step up to this level. Eddie Lampkin came from the Big 12, TCU in Colorado, so he kind of knows the deal when it comes to high-level basketball in that sense. So these are all the things they're dealing with going into the new year, and I look at the defense. We mentioned how bad the defense was early. You might as well be playing zone. I'm not saying all the time, but Wake Forest is the worst 3-point shooting team in the ACC and one of the worst in the country. They hit 9 of 19? Yeah, 9 of 19 in this game, right? Any bad 3-point shooting team is going to become, for a night, a good 3-point shooting team if you give them open shots in the corner. Open shots in the corner is the problem with the zone. So if you're going to give them those shots, you might as well switch into the zone when teams are shooting that well, because the man-to-man defense you're playing is giving them the same shot and the same weakness in the zone. Ultimately, this is not a good defensive team. They don't play man-to-man defense well. Which is why Autry, and I understand this is kind of the form of man-to-man defense, but they pressed a hell of a lot more in that Bucknell game. Now, Wake Forest was ready for it. Syracuse did a little bit of press in this one. They saw that on film. They knew. That's the issue with ACC teams that know you. Steve Forbes is a great coach. I like what he does at Wake Forest, and we'll see how they do this year. They're kind of middle of the pack, below the pack in the ACC right now. But smart coaches that have seen this and spot things on film and know you and know your tendencies, it's going to be hard to, you could do that against Bucknell. You can't do that against teams that are expecting it, right? So that's something that Autry's still trying to find. And that's the issue. This team does not have a go-to guy. It was JJ. When JJ comes back, I'm sure he'll try to get back into that role, but it's going to take him a couple of games, to get back into that. It's not a good defensive team. It's not a good three-point shooting team. It's an inconsistent free throw shooting team. Like, they're trying to find the right. I actually, for a while, Autry stuck with the right lineups, right? To his credit, recognized Bell, Moore, can't have it. Lucas Taylor and Kyle Cuffe, even though Cuffe pushed it minutes-wise because he's not used to playing that many minutes, you had to keep him out there. I was thinking to myself about halfway through the second half, I'm like, Red is doing a good job not messing with the good thing right now. But then I mentioned the Freeman thing. There was a couple lineup changes. Peter Mostartovich should not have been out there. I like Pitar. I like the Maestro. I like what he brings to the table in some ways. Defensively, though, it's still a challenge for him. So there are moments that he can't be out there. But again, when the people above him aren't giving you what you need, you're kind of looking down that bench like, who do I have that can go in there and do what I need to do? There's a lot of balls in the air, right? And Autry's not catching all of them, right? It'd be one thing if he was juggling. It was just like you're watching a show. Like he's juggling, but 3 or 4 hitting the ground. He's got to pick them up, and he's trying to figure out what's going on with this lineup and this team. Again, with players out and certain things that I think we have to be fair and account into the conversation here. But I'm just not somebody that, how can I put this fairly? Looks over at the sideline. I'm like, that guy's 4 steps ahead. I think that's fair to say. I don't look over there and see a coach who talks about his orange standard a lot saying that guy's 3 steps ahead right now. They'll be fine. Like they'll be fine. I see a guy that's struggling to find any kind of rhythm and still trying to find his team. 13, 14 games into the year. I understand you could say that about a lot of teams, and Danny Hurley would say that about his team, right? But go beyond the coach speak. Look at how he coaches. Look at the lineup changes. There weren't as many hockey lines tonight, but what I don't get is when I look over there, I'm like, this guy, let me put it to you this way. There are a lot of coaches I've watched over the years. I'm like, I do not want to play chess against that guy. I don't get that sense from Autry right now. Just being fair, just looking at it objectively, and I understand he doesn't have all the pieces on the board he needs right now, but that's going to be a problem in ACC play. Now, was coaching why they lost this game tonight? No. Wasn't the primary reason. It was a reason. It is always a reason. I wouldn't rank it high, particularly here, but the consistent slow starts, that is coaching. What is getting lost in translation that you can't start games better, right? That kind of thing. And we could do a whole show on this, but that continues to be an issue as we flip the calendar into 2025 here, and they're going to get into the thick of ACC play. All right, that's enough from me. I want to hear what our Syracuse Sports Insiders had to say about this one. And Brian leads us off here saying, hashtag orange standard. Red, please consult Fran before you look at the transfer portal. I think he pulled talent from the right schools. You did not. Speaking of Fran Brown, of course. Look, Lucas Taylor is coming into his own. Carlos has his issues, but he gave you 16 points tonight when you needed somebody to complement and get 16 points. Lampkin, again, we've talked about the ups and downs of Lampkin. We'll see what happens when they get into the thick of ACC play. And who are we forgetting here from the portal? I went through a few guys there. I'm forgetting a big one, though. Let's see. Carlos, Lampkin, Pitar, I mean, technically as a freshman, Lucas Taylor, Davis, right, who comes from Delaware. I think the jury's still out on that. I want to be fair about that. We've seen their ups and downs. There were some lineups out there tonight where I'm shaking my head saying that's not an ACC lineup. I'm not ready to fully put a report card out there that they failed in the portal, but, I mean, if you're comparing the two, I mean, football and basketball are different things. But see, that's the thing. In basketball, you get that one guy that can make a huge difference. Portal, recruiting, whatever the case may be. Speaking of which, Kiyan Anthony sitting courtside tonight was introduced by Mike Veely, the public address announcer, got a big reception from the Dome crowd. At some point, and maybe you're already there, Some people turn the page and start looking at that. I've referenced this before. I'll reference it again. The beacon over the hill, right? 2025. You've got Anthony. You've got Sadiq White. You've got a great recruiting class that you start to turn the page. Well, what do they got next year? Who's going to be around next year? Who goes in the portal? Who goes to the NBA? Who, like, that yearly process, that transactions, the free agency that we consistently talk about more in college sports, as we're doing now with football in the portal, right? The more this team loses and gives you less reason to invest in the current version, you start saying, well, what about next year? Well, next year was sitting courtside watching this one tonight. I think we have, yeah, there he is. Shout out to Dennis Nett, syracuse.com. There's Kiyan and some buddies sitting courtside tonight watching this one. So next year was at this one tonight. We'll see if Sadiq White visits soon. Little tease for you for our syracuse.com readers. Some good coverage about Sadiq White coming soon. I'll leave it at that. Don't want to give away everything, but stay tuned for that coming soon. Let's see here from Antonio, who says, once Starling returns, here's what he wants to see as the lineup. Carlos, Starling, Cuffe, Freeman, Lampkin. With Taylor and Bell spelling Cuffe, Davis spelling Freeman. He just says, and good luck at center. Good luck. Is he on the roster? Matt S. Energy's there. The effort is there. But 13 games in, it just seems like a group of guys that's never played before together. From Jeff A., who says the lack of three-point shooters on the Syracuse roster is inexplicable. Even mid-majors get shooters. Why is our roster lacking so many shooters? I mean, in theory, they had a couple shooters. Bell hasn't hit a 3 in 6 games. If you had told me that before the season, by the way, there was no way I would ever believe you. You're going to tell me Chris Bell is going to go 6 straight games without hitting a three-pointer? Are you insane? I mean, every good shooter has a slump, but 6 games? No way. No way I would believe you. Elijah Moore came in as a shooter, freshman, making that adjustment, right? You couldn't count on him to be your second-best three-point shooter. He showed some flashes. He can do it. He'll work through it, right? Cuffe, you don't want him taking 8 threes, but he can hit a couple. JJ can hit the 3. He's been out. So you start going down the list of guys. I mentioned it earlier. You don't want Jair Davis taking 3 or 4 threes in this game, right? Freeman can hit a couple. You're not counting on him to be a primary three-point shooter, but he can hit a couple, right? So, Jeff, they're there. They've just disappeared, right? It's not a strength of this team, but you've got a few guys on this team that, in theory, can hit them, and we've seen them hit before, but they are lost in that department right now. Micah T says, I turned it off, turned it on, turned it off, better things to do, got nothing more to say. Team is a joke. He was pretty fired up early on here, but he added this. It's just a complete mismanagement of the roster. Red has no clue who his go-to guy is. He has no clue what lineups work. His late game management is also questionable. I know Micah, guys. He's a smart fan. He's one of the more passionate fans that I know, and if he's feeling that way, you got to be concerned about that. Now, this is my guy, Evan. I call him number 1 EC because he was our first Syracuse Sports Insider to subscribe. He says and thinks there's no answer. So bad defensively that they have to move to a lineup with Taylor, Carlos, and Cuffe. That's not an ACC lineup. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. From Jeff N., who says this is the beginning to be like watching the same bad movie over and over again. No defensive pressure at all and no offensive flow. A couple more from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, including from Randy. Says it's hard to win when you're down a guy and then 2 of your starters no-show. In some ways, it was a way closer game than it probably should have been. Syracuse also missed some timely free throws. Wake Forest helped the cause. Wake Forest had this huge lead in the first half, then they went in the tank shooting-wise for a while. They missed 9 of 10 at one point, then they missed like 7 of 10 at another. Syracuse goes on that big run. There was a time, let's see, so Wake Forest, let's see if I can do my math here, cover up the camera with my notebook here. Donna Natota noted this too. So you can check out her Twitter. Oh, so here it is. So they started 19-3. Wake Forest is up. From that point to, I want to say it's when Syracuse got the lead. My math could be off a little bit here, but the point being, there was a time in this game when Syracuse outscored Wake 42-20. So they flipped the script, right? Wake has this huge lead. Syracuse flips the script on them. They're outscoring them 42-20. And like, okay, as Randy said, this didn't feel like a game that the score should have been what it was, but they did do that, right? We spent a lot of time discussing the flaws of this team. They could have rolled over and died. As much as the slow starts have got to end, they could have rolled over and died at home in their ACC opener with that huge lead that Wake Forest had. Now, again, Wake helped the cause in that case, but to watch a team that's capable of doing that at times, like they have these flashes of brilliance where you're like, well, they can do that. Just why can't they do certain things as consistently as they need to? That's the trick, right? From Frankie, who, once again, saw it at the Dome tonight. Great to see him, and says, I feel like for this season, I've reached that 7th stage of grief, acceptance. This team just is what it is. It isn't very good, and as you mentioned many times, we now have to start to think, pointing towards the beacon over the hill. Today's game was just another example of how there's just something missing with this club. A couple more from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, from Brian C., who says, the difference between this team and most other Syracuse teams is the inconsistency. When they were up 6, other Syracuse teams would have kept the momentum. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in Red Autry's mouth, but a couple things he said post-game agree with that. Little things add up. Free throws, turnovers, not moving the ball where it needs to be, just a lot of things that are missing there. That's kind of what Brian's referring to there. And you watch this team, and that's it. You just don't say, okay, well, this guy's going to take over, or this is going to happen, or that coach over there is 3 steps ahead and is going to figure this out. You're just kind of on the edge of your seat, seeing what's going to happen, right? TJ says, Brent, I have tried to stay positive, but watching this team keep progressing is rough. I've always looked forward to watching Syracuse basketball, even during the rough patches, but to me, this is rock bottom. And he adds this, can Fran Brown coach both sports? The ACC is a horrible conference right now, and Cuse could be and looks to be the worst team in it. So quite a note to end 2024 on, but that's kind of where we're at here as we turn the page to 2025 and some things this team has to work on that were all on display in one game against Wake Forest tonight. But the bottom line is Syracuse will go into 2025 6-7, below 500, 0-2 in ACC play, and still trying to figure out a lot about itself. They'll get JJ back at some point here, but that is not a magic elixir. That is not going to solve all this team's problems by any stretch of the imagination. And the future of Syracuse basketball, starting in 2025, the beacon over the hill, along with Sadiq White, Luke Fennell, and others, Kiyan Anthony saw it all courtside tonight. By the way, a little note on that. A lot of people were trying to get selfies with. I understand this because, you know, if one person goes over, then another goes over, and now you got a big crowd, and they're blocking people's view for the game. So I understand this, but a lot of people were trying to get selfies with Kiyan, and Syracuse security was very politely telling people that's probably not a good idea during the game. But it just goes to show you the celebrity he already has, the face recognition he already has. I mean, smart fans know when recruits are sitting courtside and who they are, and passionate fans always want to go over and say hello and get selfies. But Anthony's on a different level, right? There's a buzz. People were looking for him. Like, has he come out yet? Has he come out yet? And he came out and got the announcement on the scoreboard, right? Like, this works both ways. When you have that much attention on you, it's going to elicit a certain reaction from the fan base. And what it's now going to do, fair or unfair, right? I would agree it's unfair to put this much on the shoulders of any player, even with his last name, no matter what your last name is. But the more this team sinks, the more people start thinking about next year. And he is the primary headline focus of this team next year. So it was interesting that he was literally sitting courtside as people are maybe starting to think more and more about the 2025 Syracuse Orange. But that's 25-26. The 24-25 team still has to finish things out. When we meet again here on Syracuse Basketball Postgame, it'll be next year. It'll be Saturday after the Orange take on Florida State. Really interesting story at Florida State this week. If you didn't catch that, some players suing Leonard Hamilton, the now elder statesman in the ACC, because of some NIL payments that did not come their way. Welcome to college sports, air quotes, in 2025. So I don't know how that's going to affect this matchup on Saturday, but at least the Orange and anybody going to that game and the headlines and storylines going into that game are off the court as it seems those things are never far away in college sports these days. So interesting subplot surrounding that one, and we'll see where that goes. In the meantime, thank you, everybody. Happy New Year. Hope you guys had a terrific 2024. Hope all the best for you in 2025. We'll be here in 2025 on Syracuse Sports, on the post-game shows with all the latest from the transfer portal, anything that sparks a potential live pod, maybe the designation by the NCAA of one Kyle McCord. We'll certainly be all over that. And our Syracuse Sports Insiders are going to get it first. They're going to get that back and forth on the text messages, and they are going to get that access that they enjoy and that I enjoy, and the back and forth that you get as a Syracuse Sports Insider with direct text message access to me. This is not a group text. I do send all the insiders text a few times a day, tidbits, news, things that are happening, opinions, right? But not your typical group text. So if you're thinking like, I don't like group text, this is not a typical group text. Think of it this way. You text me, I text you. That's how it goes. Join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports. We hope to see you as a Syracuse Sports Insider in 2025. And thanks to all of our Syracuse Sports Insiders for the great back and forth throughout 2024. So for tonight, Syracuse loses their ACC home opener to Wake Forest, 81-71. It's all been presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. Happy New Year, everybody. We will talk to you Saturday after the Orange take on Florida State.